the internet. I'm doing a 3D print and I wanted to make one of those time lapses where you see it build layer by layer. The problem is this 3D print I'm doing is massive. I've set up a setup, which is the printer, which is 50 by 50 centimeters, so it's massive. And it's connected to this Raspberry Pi, which is telling this camera to take a picture every layer change. But this is going to take 3 days, and the chances of me knocking this tripod, accidentally turning the light on, forget to turn it off, or one of these bulbs going is very high, and if that happens then it's fucked. So here's one print, that's just the shoe, and there's another shoe, so you can see how big it is. It's going to be a man with a hand. Yeah, so I've been trying to figure out how you do it on Cinema4d, and I was looking online for some tutorials, but I couldn't find any, so I thought, okay, I'll do it myself. And I figured it out, and it looks kind of cool, so I thought I'd show you guys how to do it. But here it is rendering. We're going to do two things. We're going to prepare the model so it looks like a 3D print, and then we're going to set up the scene and animate it. There's 3 problems. Number 1 is generating the supports for the 3D printed structure. Don't worry, I fixed all these problems. It's not like, oh help. The second problem is getting it to slice layer by layer in real time. And then the third problem is getting our model to look like it's 3D printed with the layers. Let's start with number 1, which is setting up the model, giving it 3D printed supports. We have to download a program called Mesh Mixer. It's free and it's really light and fast. So go on meshmixer.com. Download it. It looks like this. So we're going to import our model. Here's the model that I'm going to use. It's the head of the boy, and it's really small, like super small. So let's scale that up. And the edit is where you make all of your transforms. Bring them up a bit like that, and maybe we can just rotate it a little bit so it looks more interesting. You can rotate around with the right mouse button. Okay, and then now we're going to make the supports. So go on analysis, overhangs, and generate supports. And what this is going to do, it's going to generate some really, really ugly tree looking supports. And this is the only software I've found that you can, oh god, it looks like it's crying. This is the only software I've found where you can export these supports as geometry. Cura Slicer and Prusa Slicer and Simplify 3D. The only export you get is G-code. I haven't found anywhere, I didn't look very hard, I only looked on the first page of Google, but I haven't found anywhere that you can convert G-code into your geometry. But it might exist, and you can do it that way. Okay, so then we generate the supports, and then we convert to solid as a new object, so we can keep them separate, because we're going to have to do some remeshing, unfortunately. Okay, supports, head. So we'll export the supports, sup, and we'll export the head as well, just because we've made some transforms to it, so we don't have to copy them on the original. Look, that one's really big. What is it? 1, 2, 3. Oi, over a million faces, so we're definitely going to have to remesh that one. Okay, so we're done with Mesh Mixer, and we can go into Cinema4d and drop in those 2 exports and take the head and copy it over to the supports. Oh, that's so gross. And then we rotate it 90 degrees because Cinema4d's rotation values are bougie. Is it HPV or something? Okay, so support's done. Now we need to remesh. We need to remesh it because we're going to slice it with a boule, and boules are notoriously awful. and very heavy. So if we look at this geometry, it's way too much. It's either going to crash or take a really long time. We don't want that. So let's first take the the supports, and we will add in a remesh. I press Shift C to bring up this quick search menu, by the way. Remesh. We are going to want to turn adaptive up to 100. Let's take the mesh density down to 80% and drop in the supports, and then you have to wait for it. It's going to probably take, I mean, this amount will take like 3 minutes, 4 minutes. I'm going to get some coffee. That actually took like 5 minutes, and I've got a really powerful machine. So if you're running it on a laptop or something, you're going to have to wait like 10 minutes, but there's nothing you can do. Unless you've got ZBrush, then you can use the real Z-Remesher in ZBrush, but it's paid software, so I didn't want to include it in here, this tutorial. Okay, so I'm going to make that editable, pull it out of the null, and let's call that supports. And that's done. So now we can remesh the head. This will probably remesh okay with the remesher tool. I'm going to just show you an alternative way of remeshing for those with a not powerful computer. So you go on volume builder. So we're just doing volume build as a remesh. So go on volume builder and drop in your model. Turn the voxels down to 0.1. Maybe 0.3 or 0.3, okay, and then I always add some smoothing, 30%. Maybe those voxels can be 25, okay, and then we add in volume mesher, and you can play with the adaptiveness. Actually, don't you touch the adaptiveness, because it's going to bring in triangles, and we don't want triangles. Okay, so you can see that's a bit better. And from there, we can add in a remesh. Shift C to bring up the quick menu, remesh. We can remesh that with 100% adaptiveness. And that should be quite fast. Very nice. Alright, so let's make that editable now. And that's our head. So now we've got our supports on our head. There's a couple of floating ones here that I guess happened with the smooth. So let's go into polygon mode, and if you press UF, you'll get the fill selection, so we can delete them. Just those floating ones. Okay. What we need to do now is connect these. So we Shift C, connect, drop them in. Turn off tolerance, because again it's just going to bring in triangles, and we don't want any triangles. So make sure weld's on and turn off tolerance, and then we can make it editable again. The most destructive workflow in the world. Okay, so here's our model. We want to do one more thing. We need to add a cloth surface to it, because right now it's just hollow with no thickness, and we want to give it a little bit of thickness. But first let's move on to the bool, so then we can see inside it. So I'm going to add a cube, which is going to be our bool mask.
and make sure it covers the model. Let's put it about halfway up. So this is what's going to mask out the model. So anything that's inside the cube will be hidden. So now we do the bool. We don't need high quality, so we can turn that off. Put in the model first, and then the cube. And here's our bool, and it should move quite fast. See, look at that. I mean, it's not real time, but it's pretty good, and that's just because we have nice remeshing and only quads. But if you can see inside, it's solid. So how we're going to fix that is we are going to add a cloth surface, and we can put that, let's just turn the bool off so it doesn't break, and we put the model as a child of the cloth surface. So now we can, whoa, wait a sec. I don't know if you heard that loud bang, but that was the filament from the 3D printer falling off, the filament roll falling off the table, which pulled out one of the motors, so that print's failed. Told you, the likelihood of something going wrong with a 3-day print is just so high. Yeah, so that time lapse is fucked, so it's a good job we're doing this one, isn't it? Yeah, okay, so turn the bool back on, and then we need to give it some thickness. Minus, we're going to go minus because we want the thickness to be inside, not outside. I think we might just have to move the cube up a little bit to sort of reset the bool. Yeah, there we go. Now it's the cloth surface has a subdivide, which is making it go slow, and we don't need a subdivide. Okay, so now we can see it's hollow again with some thickness, too much thickness. So we'll turn that down to 0.5, minus 0.5, even smaller, 2. Okay, that looks good. And if we move our cube, we should see that working because our geometry is light. Okay, 3D print bit done. Kind of. Let's make the cloth surface editable if we're happy with it, just so it's not calculating a cloth surface all the time. One thing we need to do is go into settings and make sure that you're in Redshift, not standard. Go on model, and we need to add a Redshift object. In the Redshift object, we need to go in geometry, override it, and enable displacement, because our texture that we're going to put on has a displacement map which is going to create slices in the geometry. Let's delete that material because we don't want that. In the description of this video, you will find this file, which is a 3D printer I made, and you can have it. You're welcome. Let's take our bool over to our 3D printer, and it's tiny, so we'll just scale it up. Okay, turn off the bool while you're scaling and hide the cube. And then we need to put it on the bed, which is here. So there, that can sit on the bed. Rotate it. Ooh. And just make it in the middle there. Don't worry that it's intersecting with the printer arm here, because we're going to animate this arm. Okay, so before we do anything else, I think we should animate the printer. So this scene that I've given you has got 350 frames, and if you open the printer mill here, you'll see x-axis, so that's this arm here. So we are going to animate that going up. So on the Y, we'll put keyframe, and at 300, we'll put it to the top of our model, which is easier to see in this view. which is like there, and then we'll add in another keyframe. And then I want to select one keyframe, Control All, to select all of them and make it a linear animation, just so there's no easing. So that's our print going up. Now we need to animate this cube doing the same thing. So on frame 0, we'll start it at the bottom of the print, keyframe on Y. On 300, align it up with the top. I'm aligning it here just with the bottom of the extruders. Keyframe, select a keyframe, Control A, linear. So now that cube and the arm are animating together. Now if we turn our ball back on, because our geometry is light from doing some good remeshing, we should be able to scrub through the timeline and see it work. So there's our print being built. Now we've got to add the last bit, actually, we're nearly done. So now we need to add a material to our 3D print model to give it layer lines so it looks like a 3D print. In the file I've given you, you'll see a material here called 3D print texture. In here is this image. I'll show you it quickly, which I made in Photoshop, and it's just lines, and this is what's going to get, this is what we're going to plug into the displacement, which is going to displace the geometry to make it sliced. I also plugged it into a bump as well to give it some more bumpiness, but the displacement's the one that makes it work. So then I've added a round corners node as well, just to soften the edges a bit. And then here we've got some scratches, which I've plugged into the colour and the roughness. If you want to change the colour of this print, because I'll show you. So let's add it on. We need to add the material not onto the model here, but onto the bool. If we put it on the model, that should be black, so I think it's not linking correctly to these textures. Let's just find them. Texture, entitled, yeah. Scratches light 01, texture, scratches light 01. Okay, it's just been a bit weird. If we look at it in render view, let's just put in a light so we can see it for real. And then we can open render view and we should be able to see our displacement. There we go, look at that. Can't see much with that light though, I'll just put in a dome. Okay, so you can see that our scratches are a bit extreme. So I've added a ramp here. So that one's plugged into the colour. That should be better. Okay, but I mean, regardless, look, you can see how this displacement maps little lines are making it look like it's been 3D printed. If you want to make the layers smaller, then you just have to go over here to this lines texture and then change the scale. Super tiny. If you're getting this artifacting, see this like weird geometry stuff, then we can just turn the displacement scale down a bit. It doesn't need to be super high. But yeah, I mean, if you make the layers super tiny, you're not even going to see them in the render. So good to have them a bit exaggerated. So that's why I have them at 0.01. Those scratches are way too much, and that's because it's plugged into the color. So if we just turn the white down a lot, like that, then that will look better. But also, you don't have to have it black. You can just remove the connection to the color, and then you can set your own color in Redshift. Green acid. Oh, that looks pretty cool actually, isn't it? Okay, I think we're done. So the rest of it is just it's animated, so now it's just about building your lighting, and I'm not going to show you how to do that. There's many tutorials online that can show you how to build lighting, but here is our animated 3D print, and let's look at it complete. Oh wow, that looks groovy.